The biting cold of a winter night in the high mountains or a frozen foxhole is a brutal teacher, and the soldiers of World War II were its most disciplined students. While the outdoor industry today spends millions marketing ultralight synthetics and high loft goose down, many of these modern marvels fail when subjected to the prolonged damp and rugged conditions of actual survival. The M1943 mountain sleeping bag system was not just a piece of bedding, it was a sophisticated piece of engineered survival technology that addressed the one thing modern gear often ignores: the physics of moisture and thermal mass. Before we break down the mechanics of this historical hack, I want to invite you to join our community of serious history enthusiasts. If you want to master the forgotten skills of the past, subscribe to Atten Recounts right now and share this resource with those who value real-world survival knowledge over marketing hype. Today, we are looking at why the heavy, often overlooked World War II sleep system remains the gold standard for staying alive in sub-zero environments. The primary reason this vintage setup outperforms modern gear lies in its multi-stage moisture management system. Modern sleeping bags rely on breathability, which often means heat escapes along with moisture, or worse, moisture traps inside the synthetic fibers and freezes into a frost line within the insulation. The World War II hack utilized a heavy 100% wool liner as the innermost layer. Wool is unique because it can absorb up to 30% of its weight in moisture without feeling damp or losing its ability to trap heat. In a freezing environment, your body still produces insensible perspiration. In the World War II system, the wool liner pulled that vapor away from your skin and held it. Because the wool was separated from the down-filled middle bag by a layer of air, the moisture stayed in the wool and didn't collapse the loft of the down. This allowed the bag to remain effective for weeks of continuous use, whereas a modern synthetic bag would eventually become a heavy, frozen mass of ice crystals. To implement this informatively in a modern context, you must move away from the one-bag philosophy. You can replicate the World War II success by sourcing a heavy-gauge wool mummy liner, preferably one with a high lanolin content. When preparing your sleep system, place the wool liner inside your primary bag. The practical application here is that the wool acts as a thermal buffer. When you move in your sleep, you aren't pumping cold air directly against your skin. You are moving against a warm, dense fabric that retains heat. If you are forced to sleep in damp clothing, the wool liner will actually draw the moisture out of your clothes and into the fibers of the wool, using your body heat to dry your base layers while you sleep, a feat that would ruin the insulating properties of a standard modern down bag. The secondary component of the World War II hack involves the use of a high-density windproof outer shell, or bivy, made of tightly woven cotton poplin. Unlike modern Gore-Tex, which can wet out and freeze shut, preventing all vapor escape, the vintage poplin was treated to be water-repellent, but remained mechanically porous. The secret hack used by veteran soldiers was to create an intentional dead air gap between the down bag and this outer shell. They would often take dry organic material, such as pine needles or even crumbled newspaper, and lightly stuff the space between the bag and the cover. This created an additional layer of insulation that didn't rely on the bag's own loft. To apply this today, you should ensure your outer bivy is oversized. This allows you to drape extra wool blankets or even your heavy winter parka over the sleeping bag but under the bivy cover. This keeps the extra insulation from sliding off in the night and protects it from the frost that forms on the underside of your shelter. The footbox of the World War II M1943 sleeping bag was specifically designed to be larger than necessary, a feature that, honestly, most modern performance bags have removed just to save weight. But, you know, this extra space was actually a critical survival feature. Soldiers would use that space to store their boots and water canteens, keeping them from freezing solid overnight. And let me tell you, a frozen boot is basically a death sentence in a survival situation, because if you have to force that onto a warm foot, it leads to immediate frostbite. The real takeaway here is the thermal battery technique. You should always make sure your footbox has enough volume to fit a stainless steel bottle filled with hot water. Just wrap that bottle in a wool sock and place it in the extra space. You're basically turning your entire sleeping bag into a convection heater. The heavy canvas and wool layers of a vintage-style setup, well, they hold this radiant heat way longer than the thin nylon walls of a modern ultralight bag. Furthermore, the durability of those World War II materials allowed for a fire-adjacent sleep system that, honestly, modern gear just can't tolerate. Synthetic bags are, in reality, pretty much made of plastic. A single spark from a survival fire will melt a hole right through the shell, causing the insulation to leak out and making the bag useless. The World War II system, with its heavy cotton and wool construction, is naturally fire-resistant. This actually lets soldiers sleep much closer to a small, long fire, or even a Dakota fire hole. For a practical tip, if you ever find yourself in a survival scenario, you can use the outer poplin or canvas cover as a heat reflector. By propping up the empty cover behind you, you can bounce the radiant heat of a fire right back into your sleeping area. This integration of fire and gear is really a skill that's been lost to folks who rely only on modern, meltable equipment. Maintaining this system, well, it's a lesson in longevity that really outclasses the buy and replace cycle of modern gear. Since the wool liner is the only part of the system that actually touches the soldier's body, it absorbs all the salts and oils that would otherwise degrade the insulation. A soldier could just remove the liner, beat it against a tree to knock out frozen sweat crystals, and air it out in just a few minutes. To apply this, you should never treat your sleeping bag as a single unit. Think of it more like a machine with replaceable parts. By keeping the insulation layers clean and dry using a sacrificial wool liner, you're preserving the R-value of your gear for, well, a lifetime. This informative approach to gear maintenance ensures that your equipment is always ready for a crisis, instead of failing you when you need it most. Ultimately, the World War II sleeping bag hack just beats modern gear because it was designed for the real world, where gear can't be babied and conditions are, honestly, never ideal. The combination of wool for moisture management, canvas for wind protection and fire resistance, and the strategic use of thermal mass, it all creates a system that's far more resilient than anything modern out there. By understanding these principles, you can actually upgrade your own kit or build a historical replica that'll keep you warm in temperatures that would, frankly, compromise a modern camper. If you value this level of detailed historical survival information, please subscribe to Atten Recounts and share this guide with your community. We really do need to keep these practical lessons of history alive so that we're never caught unprepared by the elements.